The color wheel is an amazing tool that helps you create harmonious color palette that you can use for your designs and your web applications. In this tutorial, we will create one but in a rectangular form, and with Python of course. We will use custom Tkinter widgets for our app. You can easily install it by running pip install custom Tkinter. We import the widgets we need, create the main window, we set the geometry size and title, we can make it not resizable. We create the main frame and add it with the pack layout manager. It will contain an order frame, the one that will have the color of which we will generate the corresponding harmonious color palette. We set a border to distinguish it on the interface when it has no color. We will add it to the parent frame with the grid layout manager. After, we create two labels that will display the hex and RGB color codes. We add to the RGB label a property that will store the RGB color code. Then we will create a palette containing 17 frames corresponding to 17 possible generated colors. To do this, we will simply create 3 empty lists, then use a for loop to create the frames and their corresponding hex and RGB color code labels. We create the frames with a specific border and color and add everything to the main color frame. Then we will define an init function that will be helpful later. It will simply set the border width of the frames to 2, set the colors to transparent and the text on the labels to empty strings. So each time we will have a new color or apply a new color generation method, this function will be called to reset the frames to their original state before applying the corresponding coloring. Lastly, we will create a button that will trigger later the generation of a random color that will be assigned to our first frame. Then we will call the main loop method. When we run the code, we can see that the first frame has been created and that the 17 palette frames are also visible. But when we click on the generate random color button, nothing happens because we didn't define its command property. This is what we are going to do in the next step. First, we import NumPy. We are going to use it. Then we will define the function called by the on-click of the button. The function will use numpy.random.choice to generate a random sample from 0 to 255 in the form of a list of 3 elements corresponding to an RGB color code. It will initialize the palette and change the color of the first frame, as well as the colors codes labels text. But before applying to the FG color property of the first frame, the value of the color is first converted to hex color code string using the function from RGB. Now we set the command property of the button to gen random color function. We can click on the button. It generates the random color, but no color wheel yet, so this is what we are going to do in the next step. First, we will install Color Harmonies library. It will handle for us the algorithm of the colors generation. To install it, just run pip install Color Harmonies. We will import from the library the color class, as well as the functions that will generate for us the color harmonies. The functions will correspond to the complementary, triadic, split complementary, tetradic, analogous, and monochromatic colors. We define a list of those functions. Then we define a single function that will be called by the buttons that we will create later. The function has a parameter that indicates the number of the function to be called. The function gets the color from the RGB label color property. It checks that there is actually a color, creates a color object using the RGB color codes as one of the parameters. The other parameters will be empty strings that correspond to the HLS and the HASV color codes. Call the selected color generation function, checks that the result is a list of lists. If not, it will append the generated list to an empty list. Sorts the colors, then call the function that will display the colors on the palette frames. That function will check first that the number of the colors will not exceed 17. If it's the case, it will change that number to 17. Then we'll use that number to loop through the list of frames and apply the colors and the corresponding hex and RGB labels text. Of course, it will call the init palette function first. Now we have to create the buttons that will generate the corresponding colors. We will create the list of the names of the colors generation methods that correspond to the imported generation functions, and an empty list to contain the buttons. We use the for loop to create the buttons with text taken from the list of methods names. We use lambda to set the command property to be able to pass the function number parameter to indicate the function to call. It is important to set the int equal int parameter to lambda to ensure that the int value will be distinctive for each button. Then we add the buttons to the main color frame and to the list of the buttons. Whatever the function we choose, the corresponding harmonious colors will be generated. Of course, you can define other color generation functions and add them to the list of the functions and simply change the names in the list of names. But let's say you want to generate the palette of a specific color. The random color is not the solution, adding another button is. We start by importing color chooser from Tkinter. We define a new function that we'll call the colorchooser.askColor method. The user validates his choice. The function will initialize the palette and set the selected color to the first color frame and update the text of the color codes labels. Now we add the button that will trigger the selection of the color. As you can see, when the user clicks on the select a color, the corresponding color will be assigned to the first color frame. The color wheel is highly customizable. You can easily change the colors of the main window, the borders colors of the frames, and of the labels. And here is another result. We used the method askColor that opened up a dialog, the color selector. This one allowed us to easily select a color. There are other types of dialogs that can be easily created, like the calendar picker dialog. In the suggested video, you will see different ways to create it and how to customize it. Bye!